All right, guys. I think we are live. Welcome to everybody. I'm Ajay Menon, your host of AM Talk Sport, and I have with me Kaustubh Pandey of Get Italian Football News, and he's a renowned journalist and a fellow calcio lover. Welcome back to the show, Kaustubh.
Thanks, Ajay. Thanks for having me. We were the last time we spoke about what? I think we spoke about Serie in general, but I think, yeah, what we'll speak about is probably a mystery to many. I mean, I remember writing about it as well. But yeah, I mean, the Napoli situation was a mystery, and that's what we're going to talk about.
Correct. And this is the first time that we're doing a live also together. We had done a pre-recorded thing last time, and जहाँ पे I think हम लोग ने cover किया about different Serie A sides, starting with Atalanta. How Atalanta have been very impressive this year. I mean, over the course of Gasperini's spell, but this year especially. And after we spoke, we've seen that Atalanta have now made it to a Coppa Italia final as
Yeah,
well as a Europa League semi-final. So what do you think? Which trophy are they going to win amongst the two?
I wish it's a Coppa Italia because they'll beat Juventus, and no one. I mean, no one. I was about to say no one here, but a lot of people in general don't like Juventus. So I hope they win the Coppa Italia because that will at least help them seal the Europa League spot. Because
Hmm.
I also think that the Europa League thing is going to be really difficult considering the teams that are around them.
Right,
Because
right.
it's like they still have Leverkusen there, there's still Roma
Hmm.
there. So I think
Marseille first, an informed Aubameyang.
yeah, and it's also that it's been a while since Atlanta won silverware. So
Correct,
a bit like Fiorentina, I think. So
correct, correct.
and I seriously hope that Fiorentina won the Coppa Italia as well. They lost in that second leg
Yeah,
4-1.
yeah,
So I thought
yeah.
it will be a big moment for Atlanta because Gasperini, especially the Premier League fans out there,
Right,
mock Gasperini for not having won enough silverware. So that I mean that's how transfixed they are on the idea of you know silverware.
correct.
Not me, because I believe Gasperini has done his job excellently over the years, and he deserves that silverware now. So I hope he wins the Coppa Italia by beating Juventus. That is
That too,
especially.
that'll be poetic if actually they beat Juve, and Juve having won so many Coppe over the last years. I even lost count because there was a time when Roma had nine Coppa Italia and Juve had seven, and after that I
Hmm.
think they won like seven on the trot or
Yeah.
something like that. So,
Yeah.
मैंने तो I've lost count of UA. So obviously, as a neutral or as a non-UA fan, we'll obviously be supporting Atalanta for that. Speaking about Bologna, very impressive as well, beating Roma convincingly
Yeah.
away from home and solidifying. So most likely we're going to see them in the Champions League.
Yeah. I mean, there was a point early on in the season where I thought they are probably going to end up like, Cagliari from what 4 seasons ago again under Rolando Maran. There was that, I guess it was the 18-19 season when they were getting these big results early on in the season, but the way
Right.
they've gone on, that's been like, for me, the most surprising thing about European football in general this season because it's like,
Right.
um, the player. I mean, we spoke about this in the previous podcast as well. That a lot of players that they had would have. I always felt that they would have benefited from a manager like Thiago Motta. I mean, not specifically Motta, someone who had similar principles as Thiago Motta. And I'm
Mhm.
so glad that it's coming through because they, again, Bologna are a club who always had that plan of signing, when it comes to the recruitment of signing lesser known players.
Right.
And I believe that whenever there's lesser known players or younger, lesser known players, you can't have them play a pragmatic brand of football. Especially at a club like Bologna, you need to make sure that you have a manager who plays a progressive brand of football, which Mota has been doing. Mihailovic tried, but didn't always work out. I mean, they obviously finished in some decent positions,
Yeah.
but I always
Top of
thought that
the table.
yeah, essentially they essentially, I mean, went a level ahead with Mota. They
You
really
frozen.
needed.
You were just frozen in between, costume.
Achha, sorry. I was saying that Mota is simply a level up on Mihailovic. where um, he's been using a very specific brand of football,
Right.
whereas Mihailovic was sometimes I thought it was up in the air. That's no disrespect to him, of course, because he did a good job with that side. I always thought
Obviously.
Bologna could always go a level up. And considering the brand of the city as well, Bologna, one of the biggest cities in the country, I thought the city and the club in general deserved someone like Mota, someone who was a big name, someone who could take the club to a new heights. And I'm so glad they're doing that because it's great for the city and the Bologna brand. That there's an
Even the
American owner
ownership,
there.
the American owners, right? Over there
Yeah.
in Bologna.
Yeah, there's an American owner there, and whenever we have American owners over in Serie A, we see them commercializing a lot of aspects at the club, which is what we've seen with Roma, with Fiorentina, and a lot of clubs out there. Even Venezia, which we saw with their jerseys 2 seasons
Right.
ago, they still do that, in fact. So I thought Bologna were going to benefit, and they've. One thing I've liked about Bologna, recruitment-wise, is that they've kept that identity going in terms
Hmm.
of recruitment. Because a lot of times you have new owners coming in, and they completely change how a club signs players or the sort of players a club signs. They've kept that identity going, making sure that there's consistency in approach. And in the last episode, we spoke about consistency in approach for Atlanta, and I want to see more of the same from Bologna in the next 3 seasons or 2 seasons now. Be it under be it under Mota or could be under a manager of a similar sort.
Vincenzo Italiano, for all you know, or
Yeah,
even a
or
Mourinho.
maybe Alberto Gilardino from Genoa.
Hmm. Brilliant. So we'll get to the topic, which is Napoli and Napoli's disastrous defense of the Scudetto. Uh, it's been, an epic fail for lack of better words. They were absolutely brilliant under Luciano Spalletti the year before, and they thoroughly deserve to win the Scudetto. And of course, like Chintan has mentioned, Quaradona and Victor Osimhen were the stars, along with Kim Min Jae and others as well. So, what was Spalletti's approach? What did he get right? And what was the main factors? What were the main factors for Napoli winning an unprecedented Scudetto? No one actually labeled them as favorites, but they won it. So, what are your analysis of that season, the Scudetto winning season?
I think I always thought that Spalletti, as a manager, had this excellent ability to overperform with teams. And I think you would agree with that from his time as Roma, the way he innovated tactically, made
Yeah,
sure, I think in both the spells, not just in his first spell, and did that at Inter. I mean, that Inter spell in that 16, 17, 17, 18 period, I always thought that that Inter side might have been a top four contender, but he made sure that they finished inside the top four. But a bit like Conte, he could not take them into the advanced stages of the Champions League,
yeah,
but to take them into the top four and to make them that consistent force in the top four, that was like the end of Inter's banter era. And I'm
Hmm.
glad that Inter fans actually credit Luciano Spalletti with the manager who officially took them out of that bad era, which they have weird memories of strange players playing for Inter. And then coming to Napoli, I, personally, I didn't expect him to win the Serie. I simply expected him to make Napoli consistent top four contenders,
Yeah.
which they sort of were, but there were also times when they finished outside. And when I looked at uh, their squad, I mean, Napoli always had a decent squad, by the way. I always saw that Napoli, the way they recruited, the way they sold, they always had that strong core group of players,
Right.
which, I mean, in Spalletti's first season, they had Insigne, Koulibaly, Dries Mertens. They had these club heroes. Fabian Ruiz was there. He scored that brilliant goal against Lazio, I think, a long range screamer in
Yeah.
his first
Yeah.
season
The
when
Olympico.
Napoli went back to the top of the league.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a great moment for him, but then things fell apart. So I thought when Napoli lost Koulibaly to Chelsea, Insigne to Toronto FC, and then Mertens went to Turkey, and
Yeah.
Fabian Ruiz joined PSG. I mean, they lost four icons in one go, which
Mm.
is firstly unheard of, and secondly, it's difficult to cope with. But then again, they had Cristiano Giuntoli, who's probably the best sporting director in Italy. I
Correct.
mean, I rate Beppe Marotta as a CEO, not a sporting director,
Right.
just specifying. So Giuntoli has always been good at recruitment. When he gets into these situations where his club um, has earned a specific amount of money from certain sales, he always has this short list of players that he has to sign.
Right.
Um, I mean, Osimhen was obviously already there.
Yep.
Uh, and Kim Min-jae, for a while, it seemed as if he was going to go to Rennes in France
Yeah.
for sort of similar fee. And Juventus also liked him. A couple of English clubs also liked him.
Right.
Um, for a while, I thought he's off to Rennes.
Mm.
Napoli have sadly lost out on a player who I had heard of when Tottenham wanted to sign him about in I think 2020 when Mourinho was there, and
Right.
Son
Right. Right. Mourinho.
actually
Yep. You're right.
and Son was a fellow South Korean at Tottenham, and they were constantly linked with the move for Kim. I had heard of him. I think that was a time when he was playing in China. So I always thought that was a weird thing, a huge risk for a club like Spurs playing in the Premier League and then signing a player over from China, a South Korean player from China. But that was when Kim joined Napoli, he wasn't in China, and he had shown that he can operate at a pretty high level as well.
Right.
Um, but he had big shoes to fill. Firstly, I mean, not just in terms of ability, but what Koulibaly meant to Napoli, because he was this real role model for a lot of Napoli fans. Fought
Right.
against. I think Koulibaly was one of the first.
He's an honorary citizen of Naples. He's
Yeah,
got the.
exactly, and he was one of the first Serie A black players to speak up against racism rather
Yes.
publicly,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
made him a very likable public figure, even in general, not just for
Right.
the people in Naples, but for Serie A fans in general.
Right.
But
But
Kim came in and made an impact
Do
right
you
from the
agree
first game.
with do you agree with Parmeshwar's comment that it was the core that was aging and they were struggling to
Yeah,
move on?
yeah.
Yeah.
Because I think it was a while since they seriously challenged for the title. And Insigne, even before um, he left, I remember him having a weird season where I don't think he scored more than five non-penalty goals that season. All his goals came from penalties, and that clearly showed that his. I mean, He's been doing decently well at Toronto FC, but that's like a different kettle of fish altogether. It's like even Mertens wasn't playing as regularly, and he sort of lost his way in terms of where he found himself in the front three because Osimhen was playing regularly.
Right. Right.
Lozano or Politano played on the right.
Right.
And I think Koulibaly's issue was injuries, which we
Right.
saw when he joined Chelsea. So
Correct.
those were actually decent sales. But the issue that a lot of people spoke of was losing four players of that ilk
Hmm.
at the same time in the space of what 2 months,
Right.
and losing a sense of leadership as well.
Right.
But it was, I think, a recruitment genius from Giuntoli where they signed four players. I mean, three players who fit the bill perfectly. And I guess we'll probably speak about Kvaratskhelia and Kim Min-jae, but I thought,
We will get
um, yeah, I mean, the way Andre Frank Zambonggisa played as well
right
when Fabian Ruiz left. I mean, he wasn't really a direct replacement because he had signed on loan the previous season.
from
Um,
right.
but
No, Fulham. Where he come from?
yeah, from Fulham.
From
And
Fulham, yeah.
he actually did well at Fulham, I thought. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
I
yeah.
remember watching some games under Scott Parker at Fulham. He was actually decent, but he came to Napoli and skipped a level of development and reached a completely new level of his ability, unlocked a new skill, unlocked a new ability. So,
Correct.
and I thought that was a really important signing, and you can see that this season when Zambongisa hasn't played well, their
Yeah,
midfields look really off. They've looked really weak in midfield. It's easy to overpower them in that area of the pitch. So I thought that was essentially a recruitment genius, which I don't think Napoli can do now,
right,
because the structure they have in place right now is a bit muddled in a way where they're not sure who the next sporting director is going to be. If
right,
Conte comes in, if his good friend sporting director is going to come in just because the club CEO is making these
right,
promises to Conte about transfers and whatnot. So there's still confusion as to who's going to be the next sporting director. So I thought that was a recruitment genius, and it played off because I thought it was a co. It was, I won't call it a coincidence, but it was a coming together of two different things at the same time. Because honestly, we'll probably be trolling Aurelio De Laurentis quite a lot.
right,
He doesn't know how tactics work,
right,
and I mean the fact that the way Empoli recruited and the way Spalletti wanted his team to play pretty much mixed together. They gelled together really well. That was probably a one season thing. Uh, and since Spalletti knows how to overperform with his own teams,
right,
using the systems he has
right,
in hand,
right,
I think the one um, difference that I saw in how Spalletti operated in that title winning season at
right.
Napoli and what he did in the past is his teams had more control of the ball.
Right. So
Uh,
just to pause you there, let me just pull up the formation as well. And there are some comments that we'll get to. Arnab's comment is, Napoli and Valencia are run by owners who don't give a crap about the club. See, De Laurentiis is a I would say colorful character, but
he's a Italian
it's
Daniel Levy.
pretty much with even more flair because
Yeah,
coming from the Hollywood background, Daniel Levy is still I think a little bit uh, I don't know docile compared to De
yeah.
Laurentiis. Areas में पागल आदमी है कुछ भी करता है वो. And Quaradona के बारे में हम लोग we'll get to the Quaradona then versus now. And yeah, I mean, Param was saying that Marino coming back, if Conte. Well, we'll all get to that. Let's get the Spalletti tactics out first, and what made Spalletti the kind of genius that he is. So yeah, this is the board. This is Spalletti's 4-3-3, the most commonly used tactic for him at his Napoli scheme in his Scudetto winning season with Napoli. So just give a lowdown, Kaustubh, in how this formation and how the setup worked for Spalletti.
So the way it was different from a lot of the other Spalletti systems was that they constantly built in a back three, which usually was Giovanni Di Lorenzo dropping into a back three,
Right,
and usually Mario Rui or Matias Oliveira, whoever was playing on the left back berth, he would be much more advanced forward so that Kvaratskhelia doesn't have to deal with constant 2v1s, which we'll probably come to later when it comes to how things have changed for Kvaratskhelia.
right,
And I think Lobotka was that, you know, the hugely underrated part of the side because he was that deep lying playmaker, or what we call regista in Italian football. And he
absolutely.
set the tone for everything, played right in front of the back three, and the midfield two of Piotr Zielinski and Zambongisa played further forward. I would say Zielinski was much further forward as compared to Zambongisa.
Yeah,
When Zambongisa was sometimes tasked with carrying the ball forward, which is one of his strengths, which, as I spoke, when I saw him at Fulham, that was one of his biggest strengths as an individual, that he could carry the ball from deep midfield to advanced midfield. And then he didn't always have that final pass, but he had someone like Zielinski, Kvaratskhelia, or Osimhen there who could make things happen. We had Politano staying fairly wide,
right,
and that's what usually happens because when one of your centre backs drops in as a centre back in build up. The wide player there usually stays really wide.
Mhm.
Doesn't usually. I mean, it's weird because it's Politano. He's someone who comes inside. He
Yeah,
having Lozano also played there, and he didn't score much, but he was someone who did that Jose Callejon role basically,
yeah, pretty much.
um, who constantly stuck to that side, never came inside. I mean, in terms of drifting inside, like what Politano does these days,
Right,
and he held width basically, made sure that the opposition left back is occupied, and then we had the left side where the opposition left back combined, not sorry, not the opposition, the Napoli left back, be it Mario Rui or Oliveira, combining regularly with Kvaratskhelia, who had that room to operate wherever he wanted to on that left side, come inside, stay wide,
right,
combine constantly with the left back. And essentially, that since Napoli had a lot of control from the back with Lobotka, Kim, who's excellent on the ball and when it comes to breaking through opposition lines, um, they could essentially play in a front four sometimes where even the opposition left. Sorry, I said opposition again. The Napoli left back staying forward and
yeah,
combining with Kvaratskhelia, and Kvaratskhelia essentially operating in that half space, basically the space between the full back and the centre back.
correct,
So it was
correct,
essentially a front four. It could change depending on the opposition that Napoli played against. It did change, but
right.
the overall setup constantly remained the same. It was based on control, and I think a lot of credit goes to this. I think this is probably where a lot of credit should go to Giuntoli, where they had a lot of players who could actually execute a lot of control in possession. I mean, the current Napoli side probably can't
Pretty much.
because I mean, Di Lorenzo's not had a great season. Kim's gone. Um, Lobotka's not had an excellent season like he did the last time. So I thought the credit goes to probably all the three parties. But again, Giuntoli is the one who probably bought these players to the club, and
Right.
Spalletti, who's actually really adaptive as a manager. I mean, you can tell us more examples of that
100%.
from that Roma time where
Roma
he
time.
saw that
The first,
Francesco Totti,
right,
uh,
right,
that that example where he saw that Totti had to be reinvigorated. He experimented around, had to
right,
often keep him on the bench as well.
right,
But it helped the great fan reinvigorate his career, and that says a lot about Spalletti and how adaptive he is
right.
as as a manager.
So, in fact, also this part where Rui would come up reminded me a lot of Max Tonetto from Spalletti's first spell, and Zielinski often reminds me of Simone Perotta. He would
Yep.
always pop up and score those goals. Just keeps on running
Yeah.
all the time, and Politano would hold with and Kvaratskhelia like Amantino Mancini with Mancini with Roma. He couldn't defend and he had to. I mean, he I feel got a fresh dose of injection under Spalletti. He was a very different player under the managers before, and under
Yeah.
Spalletti he became like this all conquering, dribbling Brazilian flair midfielder, attacking midfielder, and scored very important goals just like Kvaratskhelia. So a lot of parallels between Spalletti's Roma and Spalletti's Napoli. Only difference being Spalletti's Napoli actually won the title, where Roma came close and couldn't win against a very dominant Inter. I don't know whether Parmeshwar is still there. Inter was all conquering, and during my teenage and early 20s, really, I used to hate them with a vengeance for ruining so many nights. But yeah, I mean, coming back to, I'll just stop sharing the screen. So coming back to the summer, so Spalletti leaves Napoli, goes and takes up the Italy job. And they lost Kim Min Jae. I mean, and they even, I mean, I don't think so. They've replaced him even now. You had two windows. You had the summer. You had January. But he was a key cog in Napoli's defense, and he was left. I mean, without a replacement. And even Spalletti was replaced by Rudy Garcia, which was a surprise by itself. I mean, Rudy Garcia came from Saudi, And what do you make of the whole summer and what was going on in De Laurentiis' mind?
I mean, we can never know what went inside his mind because he probably doesn't know what goes on inside his own mind. That's how strange that man is. We can speak as long as we want about what he tried and what he thought of, but at the end of it, he's a strange, strange man. Honestly, because the way he sacked Rudy Garcia, told him to F off after that Empoli loss, which and he stated that publicly, which is fairly weird, and that puts off a lot of your potential options as manager. If I'm a manager looking at what De Laurentiis said about the way he sacked Rudy Garcia, that's a red flag. I'm not going there. But
Yeah,
somehow managers just end up getting attracted to that club and what De Laurentiis offers as a project. But yeah, I mean, coming back to the point, um, as you said, they've never replaced Kim, and they did bring in Nathan from Brazil over in Brazil.
yeah,
He's had injury problems. He's played at left back and then had more injury problems, and not just in terms of the profile that he has, but also in terms of um, the fact that he's had to play at left back and how that's impacted Napoli tactically. There's a problem that Kvaratskhelia has faced because I mentioned that the fact that Napoli had proper left backs in place who could fly forward when Di Lorenzo dropped deep as a third centre back. Kvaratskhelia didn't have to make do with tough situations such as three players being on him.
mm,
I remember that Inter game that Napoli lost in the title-winning season, where I saw glimpses of how to keep Kvaratskhelia quiet. When Milan
right.
Skriniar was really, really close to Kvaratskhelia, and they pretty much kicked Kvaratskhelia out of the park,
Keep him out of the game.
basically.
Yep.
Like literally, there were times
Yeah.
when he was right outside the touchline, um, and that somewhat told me that making sure that you man mark him and then have another man who's marking his future movements could keep him fairly quiet, and that's what teams have tried to do this season. And since Napoli have not had fully fit left backs, um, that's been a problem for them.
Right.
Mario has been injured, Oliveira has been injured. I mean, they're now back, but things are now really different from how they used to be. Kvaratskhelia has he's constantly had to deal with 3v1s,
Yeah.
which I feel bad for any winger, not just Kvaratskhelia. Even if it's say any other player in Serie A who's not playing for Napoli and he's had to deal with 3v1s, I feel really bad for them because that's a structural problem.
Right.
Um, and one issue that Kvaratskhelia has had is that he's not yet been that off the ball player, which is what we see from someone like Kylian Mbappe or Vinicius Junior, even
Mm.
from Marcus Rashford for that matter. We see Kvaratskhelia always being an on the ball player and not an off the ball athlete,
True. True. True.
which is what I want to see more often from him if he
Yeah. I
wants
mean,
to take the next step.
yeah, I mean that is what I mean. Chintan had asked earlier that has he been found out? I think that answers it pretty much. With so many issues, new setup. I mean, he's gone to three managers, man. I mean,
Yeah,
four if you count Spalletti also. So let me just take Parmeshwar's question since Juntoli was mentioned there signing Manna from UA, who will be overlooked by the former director Marino, who's had a good reputation from his Napoli
yeah,
days and now at Udine. What do you make of that? And I think that basically solidifies that Conte rumor, right? I mean, it's a rumor
yeah.
now.
And more than that, I think Napoli are all, since Mana's coming in at Napoli, we're already seeing players of that Conte. I
Hmm.
won't say Conte ilk, but those wide players who can play inside. Who's Nicolo Zaniolo is one your favorite winger of all time.
मेरा बच्चा है
He's
वो.
already he's already been linked with Napoli, and Mana knows him well. That's what
Yeah.
Sky Italia sort of reported about last week. So we're already seeing shades of mm, potentially a manager of Conte's ilk who has
I would be
connections with
surprised
Juventus.
if one Cuadrado moves to Napoli. Never know, and maybe even Victor Moses might come back.
Ashley Young to Napoli confirmed.
Confirmed.
And will probably have oldest Napoli team over the last 40 decades, the 40
Absolutely,
years, not 40 decades, playing a
absolutely.
three
Are
five
you
formation.
an old fullback who can play left wing back, right wing back? Ajao. Conte is
Yeah,
looking
well,
good. I mean,
I mean,
that is
or
what his
wingers who
reputation.
can play fullback.
Lukaku to Napoli, this is the match right now.
And at
As
least,
long as
we will probably not see Osimhen there, which will be weird because I constantly thought Osimhen is a very Conte player.
pretty much, yeah,
The fact that he won't be there when Conte potentially joins, that's going to be a bit weird. And whoever they sign to replace Osimhen is going to be more interesting because it looks like Jonathan David is there
who
from Lille. He's probably
yeah,
going to be there. And it's fairly obvious that Napoli are dealing with Lille when they want players because they're stuck in a legal situation as well.
yeah,
So why not just go completely overboard with it? And if there's legal issues, we'll deal with it. And I think even for the time when Osimhen leaves for potentially looks like PSG for now.
yeah.
Um, Even when De Laurentis will have about 120 million in the bag, he's probably going to go for the cheapest striker out there.
I mean, they have so many strikers. They have Raspadori, they have Giovanni Simeone. I think who else? They've got Cyril Ngog.
Yeah,
So many strikers. You know.
and he's going for the cheapest out there when he has options such as Santiago Jimenez
Hmm.
from Feyenoord.
Yeah,
They've got Joshua Zirkzee as well, although Zirkzee is a completely different player
yeah.
to Osimhen, but there's options there. But the guy is going for the most cheapest option there because David's contract runs out in 2025, and there's not going to be much effort.
Yeah.
I mean, financial effort in signing him, basically. But yeah, coming back to the Mana point and sporting director part, I think it was reported about when Garcia was sacked. When I mean not sacked, I mean when Garcia was pretty much sacked during that international break, but he was given like 3 more weeks to do his stuff,
Yep.
somehow turn things around. When Napoli approached Conte first, and then Conte put out this public statement saying that I'm going to give time to my family. I'm still on a sabbatical. Um, this traces back to then, and what a lot of local Naples papers have said is that De Laurentiis has been in constant contact with Conte since then, and they have a pretty good working relationship. We've seen Conte at the Maradona, I guess, twice.
Hmm.
He was there during Mazzari's last game, I thought, or could be there during Garcia's last game. Oh no, I think Cannavaro was there during
Yeah.
uh,
It was Cannavaro over there. I think Conference in the
Garcia's last
Champions
game.
League game. I mean, I don't recall.
Yeah, I remember him being there twice, and then people saying, "Oh, can't be a
Hmm.
coincidence."
Yeah.
So I mean, uh, that was a big sign, and over time, reports have constantly said that um, they have a great relationship, and De Laurentiis is trying all he can to bring Conte to the club, be it giving him a clean slate, giving him control over transfers, which is a bad thing for Conte
Hmm.
um, because he's going to sign the most random
Yeah.
players out there. The
Gonzalo,
links,
all those guys.
I mean, the transfer links are going to be the weirdest. Valentino Lazaro returning to Serie A, uh, playing for Napoli. The transfer links are going to be weird. I mean, that's
Right.
what I'm here for.
Right.
Forget where Napoli finish. I'm waiting to see the players Napoli get linked with. I mean, it could be a 40-year-old that Conte once managed, won a league with at some point. Maybe Antonio Candreva gets another shot.
Maybe,
Uh,
maybe Kandreva is
because
anyways got
he's doing
relegated
really well
last
at
night.
Salernitana.
Yeah, he's got relegated last night. And
Yeah.
just to take Param's question, which player's future would you be worried about the most if Conte were to come in? I mean, Politano is one because I don't think so. Politano is a very Conte-esque player, and
Yeah.
Conte
Yeah.
got Politano
That's
out
a good
in
shot.
at Inter to Roma and Spinazzola going the other way. It didn't work out. But which player, apart from Politano, who do you think is going to be worried now since Conte is going to come?
I think I'm not sure about worried, but I think Lobotka's future is uncertain in general. Barcelona really like him.
Hmm.
Um, and they've been, I mean, they signed Oriol Romeu, who constantly gets abused every second game,
Yeah,
or pretty much every game. So, and Frankie De Jong could leave as well. I mean, he's been trying. I mean, Barcelona have been trying to sell him for the last 3 years. Never happened. So I thought Lobotka's future's uncertain in general, even though I think he's a very Conte player. Um, because Conte loves those tempo dictators from the back who can make sure that the ball transitions quickly from back to front. Um, and I think there's, I mean, since the transitioning from 4-3-3 to a 3-5-2 or uh, three
three
four
four.
three, which he used at Chelsea, uh, I believe there's going to be wingers who can't play deeper going out. Kvaratskhelia is lucky he can play in the front too. That's already been tried this season by I think Mazzari disastrously enough. I think in a couple of games. I mean, Mazzari using a 3-5-2 is the worst thing that I thought could happen to Napoli once Spalletti left. That was like stuff of nightmares. But I think,
Taking an all fluid team and making it into
yeah,
something absolutely the opposite, nightmarish.
turning them into 20th finished Cagliari or something.
Yeah, pretty
The
much.
worst thing that can happen to a club who've just won Serie A.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, the Politano point is really fair because I thought when he was at Inter, he didn't get a minute. Out at wing back, I remember this Champions League game. I think it was against Dortmund where Inter were 2-0 up, conceded thrice, and then Conte obviously made his trademark late substitution in the Champions League. They had 10 minutes, about 7 or 8 minutes to play. That's when Conte realized there needs to be an extra attacker. That was Politano, who played, I think, as a centre forward in that game. So that's the end of Politano's time at Napoli. I mean, done and
Pretty,
dusted.
pretty much.
And actually, Politano's been their for me. Politano's been their most productive player this season. So in a way, he
Hmm.
doesn't deserve to go out, but football's a
Yeah, I
sad
mean,
sport sometimes. And
just with De Laurentiis in general, and Conte and De Laurentiis, as Param mentioned, might get into a clash. I'm sure that De Laurentiis is going
yeah,
to call him Takla, Takla hai apna, wearing a wig. Knowing him, it's going to be brilliant for the newspapers and tabloids because both are characters who are, fiery enough and who often get into all these um media epic fights. I mean, at a point when Jose left Roma, even Jose was linked with the Napoli job, but I don't think
yeah,
so. That's another
which was
combination.
denied by De Laurentiis in about a week or
Pretty much,
something.
pretty much,
But
and
I think the Politano thing will be really sad. And I think there was talk of him going to Saudi Arabia and a couple of clubs being
yeah,
interested in him as well. And I think there's still a big market for Politano elsewhere in Europe because he's still a very um, advanced version of what Suso was at Milan.
right. Pretty
Like
much, pretty
he's
much. I love the kid as well. I mean, obviously
yeah,
Roma Academy product, and apparently always scores against us wearing any club
yeah,
shirt. But yeah, I mean with Osimhen going with potentially a change in formation. Um, when we were doing the bits for the episode, Stefano Pioli was linked, and then suddenly now Conte has come into the picture. But I just want you to quickly just talk about how Napoli have been playing under Calzona right now. Let me just pull up the screen. This is, I think, the last defeat, which was against Empoli. And here we go. So this is how. I mean, what is different from this to Spalletti's Napoli?
I think the structure in general, I mean, usually is fairly the same. where a lot of times one centre backs, one of the two fullbacks does drop a bit deeper. And what I've noticed is that under Calzona, in comparison to what they had under Walter Mazzari or Rudy Garcia,
Mm.
Napoli have had a bit more control in possession, um, but it's not been as much as they had under Spalletti. And I think it will be a bit unfair to expect that because this is a manager of a completely different ilk as well.
Right,
I've not watched his Slovakia team. I mean, I have, but I've not noticed any
right,
tactical patterns there. But I
right,
think the setup's fairly the same, where usually it's Politano who's had more room to operate than the right winger had under Spalletti, where the right winger had that laborious role of constantly holding weight, going back and forth on that right side.
right.
Politano's, I think, a bit of burden has been lifted off the right winger in the system, and they've, I mean, specifically Politano is given more room to come inside and then take shots off. And I think it's the problem on the left is still very much there. And I think that's been a major problem for
Yeah,
them in the entire season. That's pretty much ruined Kvaratskhelia productivity. Even though from the outside, people will look at. I mean, people who don't watch Serie A will look at it and say, "Oh, Kvaratskhelia has not had a great season." He's been very decent, by the way.
mm.
Even his numbers say that he's had these off games
Correct.
where he's looked like a shadow of himself, but there have been some really good games as well. He scored against Juventus in that big game where, for once, I thought they might get a Champions League spot somehow, but obviously fell apart after that. But the manner in which that left side has shaped up tactically, and honestly, I'm still not sure how Juan Jesus still gets to play
Huh.
at a
Yeah.
top
At the highest
team
level.
in the Serie A,
Yeah.
and
And the
he
Champions League
does that
also, man.
every week. And it's I think it's this third or fourth major Serie A club,
Yeah,
and
we
for a
are
player who's or
Roma,
maybe
Napoli.
fourth, I think fourth
I think
because
three.
he
It's
was at
between
Inter as well.
Roma and Napoli.
Oh yeah, three. So he's never been great, but he's always had that
Hmm.
Juan Jesus quota, Indian terms, where
Absolutely.
he somehow made it to teams. And since he's a left-sided centre back who's actually decent in the ball, that comes with a bit of a bonus. And he's like that Sasta Francesco Acerbi or something, where
Right,
he can't
right,
defend,
right. Absolutely,
where
man.
Acerbi can defend. I mean, that's a weird comparison considering the case that recently happened, but okay.
I know. And just look at this Napoli bench, man. I mean, I'm like you have all these forwards, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have Raspadori, you have Cyril, you have Simeone, and it's just a bunch of it's a collection of footballers rather
Yeah.
than somebody who's going to come and make an impact.
And already, I think there's three players there whose futures are in doubt, and they signed very recently.
Right,
One's Dendonker, one's Lindstrom, one's Jenska Just.
right,
There's a chance that all three of them leave. And I think Hamid Traore has a future there because the plan was that when Zielinski leaves, he's going to be
he's going to be
uh,
there.
the future replacement.
Right,
Raspadori himself has been linked with Juventus and Inter. I'm not sure if
right.
that's going to happen or not. Simeone can leave as well. He's been linked with, I think, Lazio and a couple of other clubs.
Yeah.
So I think Mazzocchi's debut was the worst I've seen in a Napoli shirt for anyone.
Mhm.
That sending off within 8 minutes or something.
Right, right, right.
So I think it's, as you said, it doesn't seem like a team. It seems like a random collection of players huddled up just for the sake of saying that we have team depth, where
Yeah,
there
within a
doesn't
few
seem
months,
to be a
it's going
purpose.
to be different. Like all of these guys, as you mentioned, are going to be gone from Napoli.
And it's going to be a very old team, as we know, because it's going to be Conte. And the weird part about all of them is that Hamid Junior Traore, the player that he was at Sassuolo or at Empoli before that,
Right,
if we compare that Hamid Traore to what Zielinski is, completely different players.
right.
And De Lorenzo was linked with the Premier League move. His agent came out 2 days ago saying that he's not leaving.
Yeah.
We have Mazzocchi on the bench, who's again
He's
a
been a,
completely different player.
he's been a shadow of himself though, De Lorenzo,
Yeah, yeah.
in the winning season.
Because I thought De Lorenzo being the way he played last season was one of the most important parts of why they won Serie A.
Yeah.
The most underrated part of it, and he's the club captain as well. But we have Mazzocchi, the backup, who's again a completely different player, who's more of a wing back. That again, we spoke about Conte. Mazzocchi might have a future under Conte because
Right.
he played as a wing back at Salernitana and he played pretty well on either side. But again, such a mismatch. And we
Mhm.
have Jens Kajuste. I mean, I never
I'd not
understood
heard of him until he joined Napoli. Even Yogesh,
exactly,
who's a Napoli fan, even he was like, "Kaun hai banda? Who are we
exactly.
signing?"
And there was that period when Zambongisa was off for the AFCON.
Yeah.
I never saw enough of Kajuste playing well. Or I think he has a couple of goals, or maybe one goal or something. But I've, I've not seen enough of him to say that he's a Napoli level footballer. So yeah, it's been a weird mismatch for all
Right.
the players. Say if Zambongis has been linked away from the club as well, saying that a lot of Premier League clubs like him and everything. So if he leaves, who are Napoli gonna replace Zambongisa with? Won't be Cayusta because he's probably gonna leave himself.
Mm.
Who who are they
Is
gonna sign
Arturo
that
Vidal still available?
replace him directly? Sorry,
Is Arturo Vidal still available?
He's what 42, and he's gonna
Perfect.
be chain smoking his way to scoring
God
long
bless
range
me.
curlers.
100%. 100%. Right. We'll head to the last segment, Kaustubh, which is Napoli versus Roma this weekend. Napoli are in eighth place. What do you think is going to happen in this game? One. And number two, where do you think Napoli are going to finish finally in the league?
There was a I did another podcast about 3 months ago at the start of the year in January. I remember saying that one of I had this inkling that one of Lazio or Napoli are somehow gonna surprise a lot of people and end up finishing inside the top five. That's not gonna happen anymore. So
Yeah.
I think Napoli are gonna finish where they are, and that actually suits them. Even though
Yeah. No Europe,
European
right?
football, yeah, no Europe have a limited squad in place with. And by the way, if Conte comes in, he's not a grandmaster of European football anyway. So
Absolutely.
it's like he essentially fits in like a glove to the way the season's going to go if they finish eight. So I think if they finish seven, they might get Conference League football. So it
Conference.
might as well finish eighth. Might as well stop playing football altogether and make sure that Conte comes in, signs his own players as meme worthy. That's going to be sign all the players that he wants for his project to take off and then potentially challenge for Serie A in his second season. Because in the first season, that never happens. We've seen that at pretty much all of his clubs, bar Juventus.
Right.
So I think it will help them a lot. Obviously, I think there's a point to be made that if they qualify for the Champions League or Europa League, they can get those Champions League finances or Europa League finances on top of Osimhen leaving. But the way Napoli have always been is that if they get 130 million, 120 million from the sale of a player, they're going to sign five players from
Yeah.
that. One's going to be a striker, one's going to be a centre back, one midfielder, and Lobotka's going to leave as well. And I think they'll probably get about 25 to 30 million from that. But yeah, I think no European football, the way that club's going, I think no European football benefits them a lot. And
Mm.
I obviously want Roma to win because Daniele De Rossi finish inside the top five, Sealet play Champions League football. That's
100%.
my that's my dream post Mourinho scenario.
100%. I
I
mean,
said that
that's
in the last podcast as well.
right. Right. I mean, the 18-minute weird game that we saw was just testimony to that. I mean, with the almost the last action of the
Yep,
game. So that it sets up beautifully for Napoli, Roma, and further, Roma by Leverkusen in the Europa League. But I think we'll get out of here and close this podcast. It was good, Kaustubh. Thanks for joining in. I think we covered
for
in
sure.
depth we covered in depth of how Napoli were under Spalletti and what has changed since then, and looking forward also to what's going to happen. So pretty much got everything covered. Any parting comments to whoever watches the stream now, later after we've done the live with regards to Napoli?
I think I may probably mentioned that earlier, but I'm looking forward to all the memification of the Conte era if he joins. That is because it's gonna be weird because Conte in 2024 after Daniel Levy under De Laurentis, stuff of dreams. I mean, there's gonna be too much content off the pitch, on the pitch. It's perfect for us. So if anyone finds those memes, just try to make sure you tag me on Twitter or anything. Just send it over to me. I need that. We need that.
We need that 100%. All right, thanks are done to everyone who's tuned in, who's everyone who's commented on this video. Hopefully, you can join us for our next live streams as well as we discuss calcio and Italian football with Indian fans and broaden, I would say, the reach of sport. I think we are doing a job for Serie without Serie paying us marketing the league.
They
So
don't care.
they don't care. Pat on our backs for doing it. All right. Ciao, ciao. Arrivederci to everybody. We'll see you guys in another live stream soon.